Okay, it is 6:02, and I'm calling this workshop to order. Because it is a workshop, we won't be taking citizen comments. That's why we're set up this way. This is a meeting where we will get information. It is hard to believe, Council, but we are 6 months into our budget.
Yes,
so
you
it is
are.
Our mid-year budget, and we will be starting on item 2A, receive update on hospitality and downtown department to include convention center, fiscal year 2018 projected revenue year to date and future rentals, and downtown programming revenue for fiscal year 2018.
Well, Mayor and Council, we appreciate the opportunity to visit with you on some important items that impact not only this year's budget, but next year's budget. And it is intentional that we are starting tonight's meeting with a bit of good news. If y'all will remember back in the budget process, we created the hospitality and downtown department. And the intent was to create some synergy between our downtown, i.e. Main Street, the convention center, the Visit Bastrop crew, and they all moved in together at the Lakey House because they have huge ways to collaborate, maximizing our experience with not only our citizens, but with our tourists and visitors. And if you will recall, not long after I got here last year, which was in March, I think somewhere around June or July, we had a conversation about the convention center. And we all agreed that there was only one way to go, and that was up. And we pledged that we would do the best we could with what we had and see where it took us. And so Kathy and I spent an extensive amount of time last year building the budget. We spent 3 or 4 days together, really dissected what was working, what wasn't working, what needed to change. One of the things that I think was most impactful is if you know anything about Kathy, Kathy is a very social person. And being isolated at the convention center, I don't think fed her soul. So being with the energy of Sarah and Becca and Shane and Dale and all of that, I think has proven to just absolutely motivate her. And I think when she gets through with this presentation, you're going to be pleasantly pleased. And understand that the results you're going to see are only 6 months into the process. So, without further ado, awesome job to Miss Kathy and her crew. Benny. Benny is one of the folks that works in the convention center. We have Steve and Andy, and boy, let me tell you what, you better put your money on their crew because the customer service accolades have gone through the roof. So, without any further ado, you have to get real close to the mic, Kathy. I want everybody to hear what you got to say.
Well, Mayor and Council, thank you again for letting us be here. Sarah is out of town, so I get to brag on Sarah's department a little bit as well this evening. As Linda said, at the beginning of this year, we did create the Hospitality and Downtown Department. We merged the two, the Convention Center and Main Street, and we are housed with the Visit Bastrop group. We created our new vision statement. We envision that all of our customers, residents, clients, and tourists enjoy a unique 5-star, 4-diamond Bastrop experience, brimming with Texas hospitality. We stole that right from the Hyatt. That's what they do. That's what they give their guests when they hit Bastrop. And so we thought it would be that we should do the same. The Hospitality and Downtown Department will leverage our resources to create a greater economic impact to the Bastrop community through downtown revitalization and beautification, unique event partnerships, top-notch event planning and meeting space, and open and creative dialogue with our community and partners. And we have been very busy the last 6 months trying to do just that. Our mission is to foster an improved Bastrop experience based on cooperation, partnerships, and strong teamwork that provides a strategic approach to increase tourism and stabilize the sales tax. And I can tell you we work hard, but we really do enjoy what we do over there. That just went way too fast. Let's get back. Well, maybe that's okay. It is. Thank you. So we did merge the departments. As Linda talked about, I am over at the Lakey House. We had some organizational changes. We added a chief storyteller with Colin, and we have a part-time storyteller as well. And then we designated a public information officer within our emergency management department. So now, when we have an emergency, and hopefully we will never have one, but it doesn't look like that's the case for Bastrop, we have a 24-hour public information officer. We have 12 hours with Tanya Cantrell. We have 12 hours with Sarah. So we will always be able to keep the public, our residents, advised on the situations that we're dealing with.
The reason that became really important is after Hurricane Harvey happened, the mayor and I went to a couple of conferences and sat in on, and specifically actually sought out the breakout sessions where people were talking about Hurricane Harvey and how they had responded and communicated with their public. And overwhelmingly, people don't call 911 anymore. They post it on social media. And if you are in an emergency, a lot of those networks don't work. And so we came to appreciate that people post on social media, and in an emergency, they expect a response, and a quick response. So it no longer became optional for us to deal with social media occasionally. We need to have somebody monitoring that 24/7. So not only do they do the social media, but they will communicate with the press and do all of that. So to ad-lib to what Kathy says, both Tanya and Sarah have gone to training and have gone through the PIO process and have written what they consider to be a robust communication plan. We have scripts written. If we have a fire, we already know what we're going to say. If we have a flood, we already know what we're going to say. If we have an ice storm, we already know what we're going to say. So they really have, in a very short period of time, put a lot of work and effort into ensuring that we can communicate from that emergency management perspective.
And also within our organizational-wide staffing, you can see that in 2018, we have 7 2/3 of staff over 17, where we had 9, and that is because the recreation coordinator, Victoria, she assumed the roles of Marty, who was our special events coordinator. So now we have one person that's taking care of actually what 2 people were doing last year. So that is the our organizational structure. But Sarah wanted me to tell you, and I don't have to tell you this because all of you were involved in this with all of this. Everything that I'm reporting on, really, we should subtract about 1/3 of the time frame, because that much time was spent on the small business revolution. But it was time well spent, because it brought Bastrop to the forefront of Texas minds, and I don't think just Texas. I think all across the United States with our networking partners that we had, and it really brought the community together. It engaged our community and regional partners. It created a culture. Everyone was doing my hashtag, my Bastrop, my hashtag, my Bastrop. Colin created 43 original videos that garnered over 158,000 views that reached over 3 million people. We had over 13 special events around that, and with hundreds of volunteer hours that added up to over $35,000 of manpower. And we received 54 media stories, 35 television, 13 online, with a total impression of over, well, it's close to 5 million. I like to go ahead and round up, but and then with the media value of over $250,000.
15 million.
15 million, I'm sorry. And all I can say is Sarah is one of the most hardworking people that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And that girl's mind was going 24/7. It still does that, but I think she was on high gear when we were in the small business revolution. So all of that was going on as well. So please keep in mind as I report as we move forward. Sarah received an additional increase of $10,000. It's the first from BEDC, and it's the first increase in 10 years. Her special event revenue has increased from fiscal year 15 from $8,767 to a projected $40,000 for this year. And you will see that what she will do with that money, what we will do with that money, that department, is that we are going to start doing the revitalization on downtown with parks, with benches and the parklets and lighting. And she's just got a great plan, and we're going to move forward with that as the year progresses.
Go back one, please.
Go back one.
I think it's important really to reiterate that her budget this year for special events revenue was $25,000. She's already anticipating $40,000. So she has well exceeded the revenue projections that she had anticipated. And I think that speaks to the synergy. One of the things that I think has really worked out across the street is there are things that Sarah loves to do. There are things that Sarah doesn't like to do. There are things that Kathy loves to do, and then there are things that Kathy doesn't love to do. The great thing is the things that Sarah loves to do are not the things that Kathy loves to do. So what they did is they just took all of the duties, and rather than saying this is mine and that is yours, oh, you like to do that, great, you go do it. And so what they've now been able to do is really leverage the strengths. And I think you're seeing that in the numbers when we're halfway through and anticipate seriously exceeding the numbers. And that's just what they know today. So I anticipate as we bring you more final numbers toward the end of the year, they'll be even more impressive than that.
And I'm sure all of you know that in the beginning of this year, we revamped everything at the convention center. That is part of what Linda and I discussed for hours this past summer on what was working, what was not working, and what we could make better. And so we created a new vision and mission statement and updated our goals with really a focus on customer service, partnering with Visit Bastrop, and I really became more engaged within the community and the region with Elgin and Smithville and all of our towns around us. We revamped the rental fees and the policies. We took those policies from a 13.5-page document to a 3.5-page document. I said it for years because I've been there from the beginning. When someone would come to rent the facility, I would say, it's just like buying a car, because it was almost just like buying a car. So in January, we debuted the new pricing structure. This is our new mission statement. It is the Bastrop Convention and Exhibit Center is committed to serving our community and guests by working as a team to build local partnerships, enhance local and regional events, and provide efficient results, ensuring economic vitality for Bastrop. The vision, the Convention and Exhibit Center will strive to showcase small town charm and hospitality within the local meetings and events industry, focusing on customer service and exceptional experiences. The Bastrop Convention Center will provide a unique combination of local and non-local use, creating a positive economic impact for our community and partners. And I want to just touch on that because my job now is more local meetings and industries, because we have Visit Bastrop, and they're going after the conventions, the more tourism-related big conferences or larger conferences. So we created the packages. The one thing that we couldn't do prior to October 1, if you rented the facility, you rented it for 16 hours. You rented it from 8 in the morning till midnight, and there was no opportunity for you to rent it for a smaller amount of time. So when we created these packages, we created them for a 4-hour block to service more smaller meetings. And as you can see now, our packages included the facility, the tables and chairs, the tablecloths, the centerpieces, your audiovisual, your podiums, microphones, and the water service. So basically, we're now providing what a hotel would provide, a smaller hotel would provide. And then we also offer, before you had to use a caterer that was on our approved catering list, you no longer have to do that. You can bring in your own caterer, but they have to be a professional caterer with their insurance. And we offer where we do it for you. You can just tell me that you want a lunch for 75 people and you want a coffee service in the morning, and then you just write us one check, and then we take care of all of that for you. And we've never offered that before, and it's being very well received. We also put together a wedding package for the brides, and that is being well received as well. So as I've said, we have streamlined the rental agreement, made it much easier for you to rent the facility. We now offer on-site linen service. We offer all of those meal options.
Hold up just a minute. One of the challenges that we faced was trying to figure out what kept us from being competitive. And so one of the challenges was linen services. You know, I've never been to a convention center that didn't offer linens. And so I asked Kathy what was the price. And they're $13 a piece when you rent them. Well, y'all can go to Amazon and get them for $13 a piece. And so what we figured out was a lot of the places in town that you get the tablecloth experience are at your hotels. Well, guess what? They wash towels. They wash sheets. And so washing tablecloths is just one more thing they wash. And so what we figured out was there are not a lot of people in Bastrop that need linen service. So we were paying for the transportation, the trip, in and out. It was just too expensive. So one of the things that staff agreed to do was to launder their own linens. We put in a washer and dryer, not realizing that it wasn't big enough. And so what's happening is that staff is going to the washateria and washing the linens. But they make it work, and they do it with a great attitude, and you just don't. I didn't know until last week when I asked the question, how's it working out? Well, it's not, but we've improvised and moved on. So they've just, you know.
I always keep a bag of quarters just in case. And we are, you know, you can rent the facility 7 days a week. It was rented on Good Friday, and it was rented on Easter Sunday this year. When everyone else had the day off, our crew was over there taking care of those events. And now we're doing bookings by appointments. We do not keep it open 8 to 5 any longer. That way, that allows the staff, if Sarah has projects downtown that they can go and work on, or special events, then we can have them downtown and not just be sitting over there or cleaning, although they do a great job. And Benny, I'm so glad you're back. That's just a side note.
One of the things that and I'm going to tell this about Kathy because she won't brag on herself the way I'm going to. Nobody is confused that Kathy suffered hugely by some of the process challenges that were beyond her control. And so she garnered a reputation in town that she was extremely difficult. And I'm not talking out of school because Becky and Kathy would have said this about themselves, but Becky wouldn't have spit on Kathy if she were on fire last year, and she would have walked to Austin to get the water. And I want to read Becky's quote, because Becky has said, "The change in service this last year is incredible. As someone who has organized regular events at the center, it's nice that the convention center now offers coffee service, menu selections, linens, and computerized floor plan layouts. It makes our job so much easier." Becky has brought the monthly luncheons from the chamber. Becky has brought the annual banquet, and there have been 5 other significant events that have happened in this county that Becky actively worked to help Kathy bring to the convention center. So that is a remarkable turnaround in a very, very, very short period of time, and I think speaks volumes to the change that has occurred across the street at the convention center. So my hat's off to Kathy and her team, because I'm not kidding you. It was not good, and that's about as high a praise as you can get.
So in the end of 17, we did a recap for you. We had 92 days in use. for the facility with a revenue of $120,000. And that just gives you a breakdown of the different events that we had there. It shows you the days in use, the revenue, that's the recap. For 18, on the books, we have 131 days already booked out with a revenue of 151, I think 612 or 62, I can't see that far. So as you can see, we have increased the occupancy, we have increased the revenue, and I really think we're on the uphill swing over there. And I just love when I'm out and about and I hear people, whether I'm at Rotary or whether I'm at a chamber function, say how happy they are to see the convention center being used like it's being used. That's a recap of what we just talked about.
Now, this to me is important because there are 365 days in a year. And in 2017, fiscal year 2017, we only had 92 days. So not even a third of the year, really. And so already mid-year, we have booked and or have booked 131 days. That's almost half a year.
And I wanted to clarify, because, you know, my mind goes to the numbers. And I'm seeing Farm Street Opry's 12 and both of them. So it's not only what you've done, it's what you've got on the books. So
yes,
you're
ma'am.
Counting things that are on the books that haven't happened
That's
yet.
right.
That's right.
Because they can't be rebooked, and so you're giving yourself credit for everything that's booked.
That's right. So every month there will be more booked dates through the year. So the important thing is that, again, we have already exceeded what we did last year, and we're only half the way through. So it really is hugely impressive. So I want to talk just a minute. I don't like that slide, so let's go to this one. Okay. This really begins to tell the story. The analogy that I use about repeat business, and this doesn't speak to men, but it sure does speak to the women. When we go to the beauty salon to get our hair done, a really good beautician is going to book our next appointment before we get up out of the chair. Because what they don't want you to do is needed a hair appointment, it not be convenient, you walk by a salon and say, well, I'll just stop here and get my hair done. So in order to keep their business going, they want you to book your next appointment while you're sitting in the chair. So they know they've got that revenue stream coming in. Well, that's what Kathy is doing, and she's pretty aggressive about it. The mayor and I had a retention visit with one of our local businesses, and a conference had come up, and so we asked about it. Are you having that conference at our convention center? Well, no, as a matter of fact, we're not. We're doing it in Austin. And it's kind of difficult. And so I said, we sure would like to be your event planner. And so he wasn't really interested in us being his event planner, and he wasn't really interested in coming to Bastrop. But he agreed to have lunch with us out of due respect for the mayor. I'm not confused how we got the lunch. And so for 40 minutes, Kathy browbeat him as sweetly as I have ever heard. Just give me one chance. Just give me one chance. Just give me one chance. I bet in that 40 minutes she said that no less than 50 times. I'm pretty convinced that he agreed to host his convention in Bastrop to shut Kathy up. I'm not exaggerating to you. And so my comment to him was, just give her a shot. Just give her a shot. So he agreed to book a 3-day conference with Bastrop, grudgingly, to shut Kathy up over a lunch we wouldn't have had if not for the mayor. And before the end of the first day, he had booked next year's conference. Isn't that awesome? And so what Kathy does is now, while that conference is there, she asks for their business, not at the end when they're tired. She asks for it day one. And so we have the Texas Electric Conference, Power Conference, Electric Power Conference. She thinks that she's going to have that sewed up through 2023. So she has got several conferences that have already booked multiple years. So pleased with the experience, they don't need to go anywhere else. So we've seen a 65% increase in repeat business. And I think that's the testament to how much progress is being made in there. This isn't a one-time deal. This is, we like the way you do business now, we're going to bring our business here. A 42% increase in occupancy. We've seen that with the number of days last year, 90, and we're at 151. And then we're at a 26% increase in revenue projections at just half a year. And what that doesn't count is revenue we've got booked for next year, revenue we've got booked 2 years out, 3 years out. And I dare say she couldn't have given you that story last year. So that is a testament to just flat out getting out there and proving that you can make it work when you're given the right tools and the right support.
And so what's on the horizon for all of us over there? I know Sarah has Table on Main coming up, and she's already getting emails about the Lost Pines Christmas, on how we're going to do that. So she's thinking about all of those things. We are going to address our existing website that the convention center has. It is 7 years old, that website, and it should probably have been revamped probably 3 years ago. And one of the issues, I know there has been some conversation on the calendar of events. We've never had a calendar of events on that website. It's not possible. When they designed that, it wasn't designed to pop up a calendar per se. But what we do have is a listing of events where you can go, it says event calendar, but when you hit it, you actually just get a listing of events. And prior to several weeks ago, we never really even put the private events on there because most of our events are private events. But we felt like it would be beneficial if people are wanting to know what is being done at the convention center, that they at least know that that date is booked, even if it's for a private event. So you can go there and see what's coming up probably for the next 3 months. And as 1 month will roll over, then we'll just update it for the next month.
So I just want to make a comment to council that there was a private citizen that made the comment because the community is very interested in how often is the convention center being used and are we taking advantage of it. And so one of the suggestions was when we talked about, Gary Schiff's 29th birthday, he may not want the whole public to know that he's going to be having a party at the convention center. So you've got to be respectful of people's privacy, but it's a building that the public would like to know that it's being used. So I shared that comment, and it took no time. They immediately addressed it and agreed, that's a great thing to show. Mr. Schiff?
Do we indicate what type of event or just that it's being used that day?
I wish I could see if it says probably just private. If it's a private event.
One of the things that actually might help is if you put a private wedding, private birthday party, private.
To give people ideas of things they can do.
Yeah, so if they look at it and say, oh man, a lot of people are using this for weddings, a lot of people are using this for private parties, for whatever. You don't have to identify anything about who it is or that, but if you just quantified it, I think it would be helpful for somebody looking at it to be able to say, oh, a lot of people use it for that.
Thank you.
Of course, there's maybe the opposite, which is nobody's using it for weddings. Why would I come here? Or nobody's using it for birthday parties or whatever. But if
Mayor Pro Tem, I've learned that no good deed goes unpunished, so it could go either way. But the main thing is to just communicate
look at it and see if that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
I think it would be helpful for people to see that.
And so we will be addressing that, and then we're also going to be working on redoing that website, whether that will just be a one-page link that will go into the city's website, where we may go into the Visit Bastrop website. We're just going to look at all of our options and then make our decision on how we're going to move forward with the Convention Center website. And then on the horizon for us, in July, we have the Red, White, and You Dancing Through the Decade dance. And what we're doing there, Becky Womble has a phenomenal event the weekend before the 4th of July. And I'm excited about that. There's some new changes, some additions this year, and it's going to be spectacular. And that is the weekend before the 4th of July. The weekend after the 4th of July, the 4th of July is on a Wednesday. Thursday night, we have the Farm Street Opry. Friday night, we have the First Friday Art Walk, and this year, Saturday night, we will have the Red, White, and You Dance, giving people a long weekend to come in to spend 2 or 3 nights here in Bastrop and celebrate the 4th with us here. And it's going to be a type of a dance that we've never done before, and it's going to be like an old USO club. We're working with the Bastrop Historical Society Museum. We're working with a museum out of LaGrange that's going to bring in a lot of the antique military cars and uniforms. We've hired a big band out of Austin that's going to come in and play big band music. We're encouraging people to dress up from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. We're doing dance lessons, dinner. So it really is a tourism event.
I'll visit with you about this offline, but there is a group of about 70 teenagers from 14 to 18 that do swing dance every Friday night, and they could help give some lessons.
Yeah, and we're going to have the old cigar girls dressed up, except they're not going to be selling cigars. They'll be selling candy or whatever. So it's going to be a whole themed event. Working with the Antique Car Club that's going to bring in antique cars as well. So that's going to be a great weekend for tourism as well, the weekend after the 4th. And then the next month we move right into the Boogie Back to Bastrop Western Swing Festival. And as Sarah put, there will be no hurricane this year. And it actually fell on the weekend of the hurricane. And we had a lot of cancellations from Houston and Corpus Christi all along the coast. But on Saturday, when that storm was coming in, we didn't call the dance. I mean, we were watching it minute by minute. We went ahead and opened the doors, and I really did not expect anyone to come that day. And I was sitting in the lobby looking at the glass, and it was raining sideways, and the trees are going like this, and you could hear them dancing. The band was going, and this one couple said, well, we're Texans, that's what we do. And so we did have people in there dancing even during the hurricane. So we called it, I think, at 4:30 because we had to get the guys back in the bands to Houston, or we called it at 4, and Judge Poppy declared the emergency at 4:30. So we got them out of here about 30 minutes ahead of the judge declaring an emergency. So we're working on that as well. So hopefully what we like to do, if we see that there's a downtime, to bring in additional revenue is to create tourism events like this where the facility is being used, where people are coming in, staying at the hotels, staying at the state parks. A lot of these people come in those big motorhomes. They stay 2 or 3 days before the event and spend a lot of money. They have a lot of money to spend. So we welcome them. So, and that is the end of my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Council, any questions? Councilmember Peterson? Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Councilmember Ennis?
Could we have a hard copy of your presentation?
We are going to upload all of the presentations in the Dropbox at the conclusion.
Great.
She doesn't trust us. She thinks that we'll look ahead, so she...
And not pay attention.
Particularly, not mentioning any names, but she particularly mentioned the mayor and the mayor pro tem would look ahead, especially on Trey's presentation. So all I want to say, Kathy Danielson, is a round of applause for you and your team.
And the whole team over there.
Yeah, it just...
And Linda.
Everybody working together, it's a great example, and I think great progress in a short time. So thank you, and please share with your staff. I see them often and speak to them when I do see them, but please thank them. And of course, we miss Sarah, and Sarah's off doing Main Street stuff right now. I think she had roundtables yesterday and board meetings today. So, council, anything else on this topic? Okay, I think we will be.
Well,
I'm sorry. Are you not?
No,
We'll be
Councilman.
excited to hear your year end. Looks great.
One of the things I will tell you is we're not going to be proposing any changes next year in rates or anything like that. We want to be able to maintain the momentum and continue to build our market. So we're going to keep doing what's working and see where it gets us. And then at the end of fiscal year 2019, when we've got benchmark data and something to compare to, and not just last year, then we will evaluate the market. We'll have enough comparison to be able to recommend some changes if needed and move forward. So
You're probably already planning on doing this, and I think it's fabulous that you guys are addressing the fact that you don't have the right washer and dryer. But I would take a look at what you're spending at the laundromat, what you're spending on time, and in your budget, if we can afford it, if the investment is you need another set or you need a bigger set, that's something you ought to look at. Okay, so for those of you that are watching from home, we are going to, right now, we're going to skip 2B and go over to item 2C, discuss funding a long-term feasibility study for funding full-time fire EMS in fiscal year 2021. Item 2C is what we'll be doing next.
Mayor and Council, I want to visit with you just a minute about whether or not the time is right to conduct a feasibility study to evaluate the need for full-time fire EMS department. If you will recall, in the Comprehensive Plan 2036, Objective 3.14 says to expand the operational capacities of the Bastrop Fire Department. And there's 7 objectives that are listed, or 7 goals, I guess, under that objective. The first is to review the potential for continuing collaborative relationship with the Bastrop ESD for providing fire protection service to Bastrop. The second is to commission a needs assessment, space needs and site needs for a new station. This station should be planned to be maintained or exceed the current ISO rating for Bastrop. As the station may be home to full-time firefighters, plans for the station should include the ability to provide property, apparatus bays, sleeping quarters, office space, kitchen, living, and support spaces. Number 3 is to consider cost related to establishing a paid full-time force, evaluate appropriate funding mechanisms, including tax assessments, which may be balanced by fire insurance savings. The 4th action item is to select a site of a minimum of 2 to 3 acres west of the Colorado River for the construction of fire station number 3. The 5th action item is to design fire station number 3, include the possibility of incorporating sleeping and living quarters within the station, determine the feasibility of design modifications to station 1 and 2, to allow for the possible construction of living quarters. The 6th action item is to include additional fire vehicles and equipment in the city's capital budget in concert with the construction of fire station number 3. And the last item was to commission a needs assessment. I copied and pasted that 7th thing, sorry. Number 7 is to adjust public safety operational budget to account for increases in fire department payroll and or training and certifications. So why today, why now? In 2020, the Burleson Crossing incentive agreement is going to be paid off. And there's going to be $565,000 available to the general fund, and that's just a little over 6 cents. Actually, this morning we thought it was way more than that, but we realized we had to divvy out some, but that's still a nice chunk of change. So 2020 is not that far away. It's fiscal year 2018. So to plan for any type of change to the fire department is a multi-year event. So The question I have for you this evening is, we're suggesting that we conduct a feasibility study in 2019 using one-time revenue to evaluate options for full-time fire EMS department, given the significant amount of funds available in 2021. You might have read the newspaper that they're anticipating an additional 10% increase in property values this year, which is slightly wigged out our finance director, because she may be one protesting the values before it's all said and done. So there's opportunities as we grow to have a plan to start executing it. So these are some of the options that need to be evaluated. And one of that is to remain voluntary with the paid part-time that we have. One is to become a full-time fire department. One is to become a full-time fire EMS department. That was not addressed in the comp plan. It is something that I have added because in recent months, we've had some challenges regarding medical service in the community. You're aware that we have a county-wide contract with a third-party provider whose primary business is transporting patients. And there have been instances where they've not been able to meet the provisions of the contract satisfactorily. And so we have met with them. We have a 60-day follow-up. They're working hard to try to remedy those concerns. So it could be an opportunity if we were to go full-time fire and we added EMS, that there may be an opportunity for countywide participation, not only between Elgin, Smithville, but Bastrop County as well. That would be one of those things to explore. And then is the question that we need to be served by ESD number 2. So all of these are thought-provoking. All of them come with a level of emotion depending on what side of the fence you are and which option you're tied to. But whatever the case may be, we need to be very methodical and make some important decisions. One of the things that makes Bastrop challenging, and I'm preaching to the choir because y'all appreciate this, is, you know, there are thoughts out there, well, you don't need full-time fire until you get to a population of 25,000. Well, the truth of the matter is we have a nighttime population of about 9,600, but we have a daytime population of 40,000. We're the county seat. We have a 2,600 square mile trade area that brings a lot of visitors to Bastrop to shop. And we have Highway 71 that on any given day has a pretty high capacity of people passing through town. So it is not easy. I don't think there's this box you can check and say, oh yeah, this is the answer. So I think that we need to take the community on a journey and determine what is the right answer, and more importantly, what are we willing to pay for long term. I always say the firemen have bigger toys and they're way more expensive. And so if we buy into fire and we buy into full-time fire, we need to buy into it right. They need to be trained appropriately. They need to have the right equipment. And it's just an expensive endeavor. I have been in communities that wanted fire, but they didn't fund it, and it's hard to play catch up. So they'd fund the equipment at a station and then they divide the personnel. Well, that just makes it hugely difficult for the chief to be able to do anything. So I'm a huge proponent of whatever we do, let's plan to do this appropriately. So the question before you is a policy question, and that is, are you interested in conducting a feasibility study to evaluate the various options related to a full-time fire department at this time? And if the answer is yes, then the feasibility study would be included in the 2019 budget for funding. We would prepare a request for qualifications to identify the appropriate firm to help with the study, and we would include it in the work plan of fiscal year 2019. If your answer is no, we will park this and we will move on, and there are plenty of opportunities to invest that one-time money in some other things. But we've made a commitment to the comp plan, and this is a good time to pause and ask the question when we know we have some significant money.
Council, I would appreciate you sharing your views. Mayor Pro Tem?
Do you have any idea what the cost of the feasibility study would be?
I don't, but I think that it would be contingent on how detailed we wanted it to be. So if the question is, do we just want to shop the options, or do we want to shop the options and put together a long-term plan about when would you add Station 3, at what point in time would you add the equipment, that could impact the price. But I did not want to go out and begin to ask this in the fire community without political cover. So before we get to the budget and you approve it, we'll have a very good estimate. But if this isn't something y'all wanted to do, I don't want to pick the scab off of it.
Do we know of firms that do this type of work, or do you have a list, or where do you find these?
Well, I know a lot of fire chiefs all over the country, so there are people that specialize in fire. And so we would put out a request for qualifications to find that person, but there are people that answer this question all the time. We are not the only city that has wrestled with this. We're not the only city that has wrestled with where do you put the station, do you do EMS or farm that out? So.
Yeah, I think it would be, obviously you need to find somebody who's done this before. You don't want to reinvent the wheel if it's been dealt with before. But I think a good thing to do as part of that feasibility, and I'm guessing that would be included, would be some benchmarking against other towns. What do other cities do of our size and nature? What are some of our options relative to other folks, and find out and visit those cities, and hey, how did it work for you, and do a little research on our own to get a little more in-depth look at it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Schiff. I would maybe add a suggestion of maybe that feasibility report ends up being in two parts. Like it's a preliminary, which way are you going to go? Enough information you can make a decision, and then if we pick a way, decide are we ready to do the deep dive. That's one possible approach I just thought of. Councilmember Nelson, do you have thoughts on this topic? I know you have thoughts.
Thank you. We'd be remiss, based upon some of the comments that have been made in the community, to not look at putting a fire station on the west side of town. I think that's a real concern of people, and the growth is going to continue.
Can you talk into the mic?
Am I not talking into it? Should I repeat? We would be remiss if we did not look at the feasibility of putting a fire station on the west side of town based upon the comments of some of our constituents. I think it's something we really need to look at very, very carefully, as Mayor Pro Tem had suggested, to ascertain what other communities of similar size and nature have done in the past, still with an eye that the uniqueness of Bastrop and its proximity to Alston, the fires that we've had in the past and how they impact our community. But it's something that I'm very supportive of, is studying the feasibility of establishing a fire station there. I am on the west side of town. I am in agreement with the mayor. There needs to be in two parts. It needs to make a determination of what is needed and what it's going to take to get there.
So what I hear is really a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 would be to research the options and make a recommendation, and then once the community got comfortable with that, is phase 2 would be, okay, now if we implemented this, what does it look like? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, from a person who's never done it and has no idea what's involved in it. I just, if you go to the slide that shows all of those different options, like if we're served by ESD, then maybe it's not, maybe we don't do the deep dive on how many of what kind of equipment if we wouldn't be doing that anyway. So we need enough information to make a good decision, but I don't think we need the Webster's Dictionary on every single option is my thought on that. Councilmember Peterson, do you have any comments?
Yeah, just one comment. I thoroughly agree with both of you guys on a need for a fire station on the west side. We kicked this can before that I'm aware of. We even thought about a location, but the location that we looked at, the residents didn't want it at the time. And I hope we can go and revisit in this study a location as well. and kind of get everything incorporated before we move forward.
That's a good point. Councilmember Ennis, do you have any thoughts to share?
Well, I also endorse the station number 3. I think that needs to be a priority. My main consideration, or should I say an important consideration in the study, is timing. To the mayor's comment, this is not an area that I know a lot about. I know that our firefighters and fire department now is doing a bang-up job, but we also know what's ahead of us. And I would be interested in knowing, number one, what the feasibility study would lay out for us as far as a jumping off point for these different options, and number two, what order they should be in, and so that we would have a concept of timing.
Yes, sir. And so what I would say to you is this. We'll figure out the cost, have some preliminary conversations, and then when we bring somebody on, it sounds to me like that's a work session. Opportunity for y'all to express your concerns, learn some fire department building 101 elements, and then y'all help tighten up what that project scope would look like, so that we end up at a place that we're comfortable with, whatever that is.
Yes, ma'am. And I think what I'm hearing from all of council, although Councilmember Jones wasn't able to be here tonight, I can't imagine that she would have, we're all fairly unified on this, so I would think she would be in agreement with this as well. Sounds like for sure we are interested in spending money next year on some sort of a study that we will work the details out when the city manager does some more due diligence. To Councilmember Peterson's point, what I hear everyone saying is the idea of doing absolutely nothing in another budget is not an option. So we need to, and the point of doing the feasibility study is to make sure that we don't make a rash decision or a halfway decision. So I'm hearing unanimous council support that it is worth spending some taxpayer dollars to make sure that we make the right investment in fire.
In the spirit of full disclosure, if you were to ask Chief Wobus, part of our stations are not in the right place. So before you build the third one, once you pick an option, we need to really step back and say, where do our fire stations need to be so that we can provide the kind of response that we're most interested in, so that as we build this plan, we can make some of those changes. One of the things that's interesting, just to prove the point, is you would think that intuitively Station 1 would be easier to get in and out of, but that's not true. The fire apparatus can leave Station 2 and be on State Highway 71 almost immediately. So that provides them the ability to get across the river, then taking the fire truck down Main Street, working the lights, the slow traffic, and all of that. So the chief is always, wrestling with where's the best place to put his equipment. So given the conditions, he can respond with what he has. And so, yes, we need to focus on Station 3, but as we do this, we need to back up and ask, are the stations we have in the right place? And if not, where does that make the best sense?
Okay, so one other comment, and I may be in trouble for asking this, but it seems to me, I know we have our interim city engineer with us. At some point, we're going to have a discussion about sprinklers, and I would think part of the coming up with the right answer is how many of the buildings downtown do not have sprinklers. When do we put that in a code? When do we make that mandatory? Because in my opinion, that would be impacting what your long-term strategic service would look like. So
absolutely,
it's a big sore that we're talking about. So Mayor Pro Tem Schiff?
Yeah, I think our city manager is correct, is looking at the existing facilities. If we're going to invest in upgrading, if we're going to put resident space in existing facilities, it's going to spend a lot of money. Why would we do that in a facility that was in the wrong location? So before we spend any more money on existing facilities, let's make sure we do have the locations correct.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yeah, I'd like to add, if we're going to do a feasibility study, and certainly these options are good options, but by our own admissions, we're somewhat ignorant as to what is required, and that's why we're going to contract with a professional consultant on this. But we need to provide them the opportunity to provide us some additional options that, based upon their well-rounded knowledge, that may be something we're not even thinking of here relative to collaborative agreements and such as that.
Yes, sir.
That's an extra good point. And of course, our citizens will be interested if there's things that we're going to do that's going to change the ISO, that'll change their insurance. We need to understand the big picture. And the only thing I know for certain is I don't know a whole lot about it. So, did you get what you needed?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments from anyone? Okay, I'm considering 2C complete, and we will be going back to 2B. Receive presentation on the pavement condition index report and discuss proposed street maintenance plan. Council, you have a handy dandy trusty map. This is from Trey, and you'll be needing that.
The mouse over there
and the pavement condition index in the engineering world, we call that PCI. So if you see PCI written or people are talking about the PCI, that's what they're talking about.
Mayor and Council, while we're waiting on Trey to pull this up, if you will recall, one of the items that was funded out of the Innovation Fund this year was a study of our pavement. And the end game of this is to develop a street maintenance plan. There were a number of things that I had pretty clear instructions when I was hired to get fixed. Drainage was number one on the list, but I think pretty high on that list was making sure we maintain our streets. So Trey has done a great job of putting together this presentation. Curtis Hancock, our Assistant Public Works Director, and David Juarez, who is our street superintendent, have spent quite a bit of time in the minutia of this report, really putting together what I think will be a very tight road maintenance plan, something that we can look at year to year and know where we are. I think that from a public stewardship of resources, we are going to be putting together a plan to do exactly what we should be doing, and hopefully building that into our tax rate so that it's sustainable and it's not just something we do the first year or two, but something we make a commitment to do every year. So we'll be talking more about that as we move forward. But what Trey's going to do is walk you through the report. Excuse me. Walk you through the report, help you understand the grades and the philosophies of how you put together a maintenance program. And you do certain things for asphalt streets, you do certain things for concrete streets. And then we're going to give you a scope of magnitude today of what we think doing it right and well cost. We'll at that point in time have a policy conversation about what's your threshold for pain, and then based on what your threshold for pain is will be what we'll leave this meeting with and put a program around the outcome. And then at the end, we're going to have another conversation about this. We're going to recommend a bus tour. When we get there, we'll explain to you the particulars. But when we leave this evening, y'all will fully understand the status of your streets. We will give you a big picture of how to fix that. We need some policy direction on how to pay for it. And then with that guidance, Trey and his team, between now and when you adopt the budget, will go back and put together a 7-year plan on what streets we fix when and how often, and put a price tag on it. So you will be able to represent to your constituents when their street's going to be touched. And that's the end game for us. So with that, I'm going to have Trey, who's got his mic on, so we will be able to hear him as he turns his head and be able to communicate. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I have technical difficulties, but I think we're going to be all right. So we'll start with just basically how the pavement condition index works, and then we'll talk about the street management plan. So we'll have an overview tonight on the data collection, the inventory, the condition assessment, and then just our basic overall score for the city of Bastrop. This is a piece of equipment that's used. It's an edge system, enhanced data gathering. Basically, these guys come in with this nice van. They drive all our streets in the network, and they come up with an image that looks something like this. So if you look to your right, that's the intense image, and it shows a really close-up view of the street and the distresses that are happening. And it's got a right side view, so you can check the edge of the curb. A front view, it also has one from every angle, but these are the ones we put in the slide. So again, just another one. This is Old Austin Highway. I only put this in because it's a little different. You can see the right view as you can watch the other lane, and to your far right again, you can see it's much more distressed. Just a different condition from the last. In the map that you have in front of you, to explain this, if you'll look, they actually broke the road, all of the city streets down into 827 road segments, and those are anywhere from 250 to 330 feet long. 16 of them were short intersections, so that east, say in Hunter's Crossing, where you just never stop, it's more of a cul-de-sac. You have to pick where it's going to go as far as one road or the other. Also, one was a private drive, one's a parking area, which is Pine Street. There's 47 areas that are unpaved, and if you look on your map, the ones that are in the black had to actually go back and they had to do those on foot, just for one reason or another. In our service area, it's broken down. Like you see on the chart, the majority of our streets are asphalt, and they're broken into two categories here, or three actually: asphalted concrete, Portland cement concrete, and then just a gravel surface, which we have 3.8 miles of unpaved. When the data is collected, it's put into a paper software, and it basically comes out with a numerical indicator that spits out an overall pavement condition, and it's based on the distress quantity, the severity of the distress, and the type. And then you end up with these scores that you can see on the right. I am having technical difficulties. Excuse me.
Trey?
Yes, sir.
What is asphaltic concrete?
It is simply just the asphalt.
Oh, it's just asphalt.
It's
Okay.
just the term for it.
Okay.
Maybe I'll stand up and it'll work a little better.
Great, thanks.
Just in case. All right. So if you look at the overall scores, the average for the pavement that was asphalt was an average score of 66 and at 54.6 miles, and then an average score of 89 for our 2.1 miles of concrete. So we really have some concrete streets that are in good shape. Again, this is just broken down a little bit farther out of that total network of 56.7 miles, 54.6, I did a little math on the fly there, forgive me, is broken down in a much bigger range. 22% of our streets are in excellent condition. That's a lot of the new roads that you see west of town. Again, satisfactory in the same area. The fair, you can look on this map and you'd probably be surprised how many are in decent shape all over the city. So what we have is what we come up with is a total score of 68, which truly is not that bad. It all depends on at what rate or score you want to hold. And speaking to the experts that do this kind of pavement analysis every day, they said an average is anywhere, or a good average, it's 68 to 75, somewhere in there. You know, an 80 would be great, but they said you probably can't afford that when you're a city this small. So, then excuse me, that was it for the actual data collection and the paper maintenance. Now let's go into a maintenance overview.
Let's just touch base. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, cool. All right, keep going.
All right, so we'll do a lane mile definition, which is where we got a lot of our calculations for the cost. Again, we'll go over the data collection, our street grades, just kind of touch on everything, benchmarking Bastrop and where we sit, the pavement, the life cycle planning that we're going to do, and then how we're going to prioritize those streets. So what we've done is Bastrop has an average road width of 28 feet, right? So we took a lane mile, we broke it down into 5,280 feet by 11. And so it's anywhere they're all different sections, they're all different widths. Some are 20, some are 28, some are 32. So we basically came up with a standard length and width so we can use it for the basis of calculating new expense. Again, another breakdown in our data collection. Out of that 54.6 miles, 12.9 miles in excellent, 12.4 is in good, 10.3 in fair, 6.6, so on and so forth. Go through the entire list. You can see that percentages, but now it's actually broken down into the miles. This is separate only in asphalt. We took away the concrete because the majority of our maintenance work is going to be there. We'll have very little cost as far as that. So we really wanted to focus on this area, and I think we can work that minimal part back into the budget. Again, as you can see, it's all broken down into percentage. What's good, what's fair, and 35%. So good news is, almost 65% of all of our asphalt roads are in pretty good shape, and the rest are in that maintenance to minor rehab area. Again, this is just some examples. Look at Walnut, which was done about a year and a half ago. SQ probably about 6 years ago. And then Wilson Street, which is in fair condition, but it also has different areas, different segments of the road, maybe in a little bit different conditions in the picture you see here. So if you live on Wilson, it's not this nice. It's only because that's not where we took the picture. So, again, Laurel Lane, I know a lot of people are familiar with that one. It's in serious condition. 6.68 miles in very poor over at Magnolia. We'll talk about that area a little bit later. Mesquite. And then Aloha, which is actually in Tahitian, which is the majority of where our belt streets are at, or not. That may not be reconstructed, so we'll have to go back and get some more data in the field and really look at those numbers, because it could be a section that we're not going to build or hasn't been built out yet, or it's required to be built by WCID before we take it over or something like that. But they're all in the city, so this is just a wide range of data that was collected in the city limits. Our concrete, actually, a couple of pictures off for poor and fair, because again, our concrete streets are in such good shape. If you'll look, there's just an example of farm, and then the example of good is right there at Business Park Drive. And we actually did some maintenance on Business Park Drive about 2 years ago. Did a lot of concrete lifting, and then came back in and sealed the cracks, which should probably last this area another 5 to 6 years. This is the 3.8 miles we talked about that are gravel. You may recognize some of this. Is also another area in Tahitian. This one's actually in Piney Ridge. City limits, however, just not necessarily. They've all got a story. Either they weren't platted. This is an area that hasn't been built yet. There's not a lot of traffic, things of that nature. We'll talk about that when we get into prioritization. So what we decided to do to benchmark the streets is we're going to just pick a fine line of where we split the maintenance versus the capitalization and the reconstruction. So there may be some areas in that very poor that we can actually do a little bit of work, but we're going to count that as
Go ahead.
if there's 40% or more of it needs to be done in full depth repair, that's when you make the decision to either do the complete reclamation or not.
One of the things that, and as Trey moves forward, you'll see more in detail, but we had a conversation about where to put that line, and we put the poor on the maintenance side because, as Trey said, there are segments that are not very big, and this report is broken into small sections. So some of this is small enough that we can do in-house rather than outsourcing or contracting. So we had a conversation, and we believe that there is a portion of the poor that we can affect in-house. May take us a little longer, but we can do it in-house and get it done quicker. When you outsource small stuff, it's not typically cost effective. That's exactly right. So you have to have a lot of that stuff to make them be willing to come in, and then because it's short and it's got problems, it just costs too much. So it may take us a little longer, but we believe it'll get done sooner. And I tell you that because if you were in another city, that's not where the line would be. It would be between the yellow and the pink. And so it is a conscious choice that we put the line there after we talked about this and then talked about it, and we got in the truck and we all went for a ride, and we think there's some areas that, because we're small and we can do some things in-house, we can leverage this in a way we otherwise would not be able to do.
Because I don't have the slides and I cannot look ahead,
Yay!
I don't know if there's a point that are you, and you may not have, so it's not a trick question. You're going to need to bump this up against your water and wastewater.
Oh yeah, we're going to tell you that if you'll just...
Okay, because to me, a pink that has a water line that needs to be replaced anyway, then it needs to, then that's kind of almost a different, and I didn't know if you were going to address that.
Oh, we're going to address that.
Okay.
We're going to address the drainage and the road, so we'll just
This
get
is
to
me
you.
being patient.
There is
Thank you.
about 60 slides, so we've got all kinds of information. So this is where, again, like Linda's talked about, this is where we picked it. We may have a section of road that has 2 blocks that's really in poor condition. Once those are redone, we can do a seal coat on the entire thing, and it brings that poor over to fair, and all of a sudden we've made a big difference in our overall score. So I want to talk about the 5 primary factors that actually affect street life. And one is traffic, which is also going to be one of our priority issues. Of course, the weather, water, heat, just oxidation and aging, some pavement structure underneath, and then our subgrades. And you can see, just by looking at the chart, the digger you deep, the more
Deeper you
you
dig.
dig, that's right, the more costly it gets. So what you want to do is keep that pavement maintained on a regular basis, just taking care of that top layer. And that's a lot cheaper than ever having to get down to the very bottom. So here's what we talk about, the difference in preventive maintenance and reconstruction or recapitalization, and why it's important. Because when you do the preventive maintenance, just like I touched on, taking care of the weathering and the aging and the seal, you're keeping the water out of that pavement, and you're extending that useful life of the overall street structure. So the base, the subgrade, that's the kind of stuff that you want to maintain and keep safe, and just use that layer of asphalt on top, and you do that with a crack seal, a fog seal, slurry seal, or any other kind of generic overlay that you pick. And preventive maintenance is something you would actually fund in your general fund budget, the maintenance that we're talking about now.
That is really important, and as he goes along, he's going to be identifying funding sources. Maintenance is not something that lasts. You do maintenance every year. So it would not be fiscally prudent to finance maintenance because it would be replaced before the useful life, the useful life would be up before it was paid off is the right way to say it. So that's why we're going to be talking to you about maintenance and putting it in the general fund, because to do otherwise is almost as irresponsible as doing nothing. At some point in time, we've got to be accountable to the taxpayers and say we're using your money well. And financing a 5 or 7 year debt on something that lasts a year is not appropriate.
So we're also talking about street rehabilitation and reconstruction. And again, when did you rehabilitate, which is what I was talking about just a moment ago. And it really comes down to getting out there, walking the streets, when it's time to do some in-depth patching or a full-depth repair, which is, I'll explain that later, but that's basically cutting out a big square, digging down anywhere from 10 to 20 inches deep, recompacting everything back. And if those numbers are over 40%, that's when you're going to start wanting to do some rehabilitation. And it may include some gutter work or something like that.
You can see on this slide that this is an opportunity to finance on a short term. One of the tools I don't know if y'all have used much is a short-term tax note. And you can do a short-term tax note for 2 to 7 years. And so you can go in and do rehabilitation, and if the street's going to last 5 or 6 years and you finance it for 4, that was a good use of your money. So we do have some debt capacity that we need to activate in the next couple of years. So when we bring you a street plan, we may have some short-term tax notes identified where we can go in and rehabilitate a street. The reason we would do that, and he'll talk to you in a minute, is when you have a large number of poor and very poor streets, you need to take care of your fares so they don't fall off. So you do the rehabilitation to buy you some time until we can fiscally afford to finance long-term the streets.
Absolutely correct. And again, we'll talk about the actual reconstruction. So this
What was your question, sir?
What is an FDRS?
Full depth repair?
Full depth repair. That's because there's multiple. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually
Full depth
it's actually a
repairs.
full depth repair, and then there's 40% of the full depth repairs, I guess, or more. Yeah. Forget the grammar. But we'll talk about the reconstruction a little bit. And this is when the street is deteriorated to a point so much that more than 40% of your pavement. So a good example, I think, without actually doing some rough math and going out there, is Old Austin Highway may still have some good sections that would be great for rehabilitation, right? Go in there with some full depth repair, resurface, something like that. And reconstruction is more like the end of Farm Street near the park. So just to give you an example of what you're talking about. So when it's to the point you can no longer patch holding hands all the way down the street, it's time to go ahead and bite the bullet. And that's also something that you would fund because you're going to extend the life expectancy. All of a sudden, this becomes a brand new road, and it drops back to year one in the cycle. So now it's technically probably the cheapest time you could ever take care of, because once it's done, it goes into the maintenance cycle, and you won't spend as much on it again for 30 years. Well, quite a while. This is just another slide on reconstruction and talking about when you have to do something to consistent the entire depth of the pavement, which is, again, just a little bit, I know it's a lot of words here, but basically you have to go into base, subgrade, and the entire work. So it's all brand new from the road up. At that time, you might add curb, you might add gutter, you may add sidewalks, and all that good stuff. This is the types of distress that you'll see. I'm sure everybody's seen a road that looks like this somewhere, but that's only 30% of our network, just like we talked about. And just the type of distress you see: alligator cracking, bleeding, distortion, edge cracking, things of that nature, raveling, rutting. And this is the kind of stuff that you would see for concrete. We have some spalding and just some big, deep cracks where the base is actually starting to fail, and you're going to have to come in and replace those panels. Again, I just have a list of the categories and the purposes.
E is for excellent, good. G
correct.
is for good. F is for fair.
That's correct.
I'm gonna tell some behind the scenes. Trey's worked on this, and I worked on this today. In about 10 minutes to 6, both of our PowerPoints got deleted. And this is a man that needed 2 cigarettes in his mouth in the building to be able to just talk himself off a shelf. So we did 1A and 1C to give him time to uncover this and find it, thanks to Andreas. And so if he's a little rattled, that's why, because we walked into this meeting not realizing if we had a presentation or not. So I just need y'all to know that's why he is wound up tighter than a 6-day clock, because it is just not been a good 35 or 40 minutes.
It has not. And not only that, this is almost a version of the two, because we could find a piece of one and a piece of the other, and I think we overrode each other. We were in the same file. So anyway,
Yes.
I'm sure there's some magic that Andres can do later, and we'll be there tomorrow when we don't need it. Anyway. So the good thing about this is it just gives you a basis of, you have all these different types of treatment in the maintenance, right? And they're all cheaper. They basically range from, they're least expensive at the top, and again, the deeper you go, the more expensive they get. So it's really important that in year 2 or year 3, if you've done that yearly visual inspection, you get out there and do a crack seal or a fog seal, and this is a generic seal coat. There are tons of different seal coat products. Everybody has their own. You want to find the best one. I've actually been looking at an HA5, which is a high-density mineral bond and has a 5-year warranty, which is rare. That never comes with a seal coat. A 5-year warranty is a pretty big deal, and it's really not any more expensive. Again, you can do a thin overlay, and this is where I started talking about the rehabilitation and the reconstruction part, and this is where we would make our decisions in that score area. When that score is below a certain point, then it's time to go ahead and do our rehabilitation.
Let's talk about fair just a minute. At the end of the day, Trey, Gary, and Connie will have a different perspective of this because it's the mechanical issues of how it's built. I'm blonde, and all I care about is it's smooth. And so when you're at the fair, and go back one slide, and he talks about putting a thin overlay over the street. All you're doing is making it smooth, because most drivers could care less about anything other than they don't have a bad experience on the road. There's nothing that jars them when they're drinking their coffee. It's just smooth, and it gets you from one end of the street to the other. So when you are at fair, doing a thin overlay that buys you 5 to 7 years is a smart investment, because the citizen that's riding on it doesn't know it's not a good street. They just know it's smooth, they get in it, and life is great. So that's what Trey was talking about, is a way that we can extend the life of a street from a citizen's perspective. Their objectives met, it's smooth, but it's bumping that street up so we can get some of the stuff that needs to be fixed and buy some time. And by the time that overlay wears out, hopefully we've got capacity in the system to go in and fix it right. So it is a financially viable duct tape.
And you're just taking top, you're coming in there, you're skimming that top layer off. You ever seen textile do that? It's actually called a top mix, then overlay mix. And it's, I don't know, half an inch, maybe an inch. They come in, they just mill off the very top, because the bases and the asphalt's in pretty good shape. And they just, again, fix that smooth ride, and you're on your way. This is just a slide that shows, you know, when you spend $1 here, it basically saves you 5 to 6 when you hit each area. And it's huge, because 80% of your street life is where you want that maintenance money.
This is counterintuitive, but good street maintenance is about keeping the good street good. And that's doesn't make sense to citizens. Well, I got a bad street. I need you to fix my bad street. Why are you spending all of this money on keeping the good streets good? Well, if you fix all of the bad streets and you let the good streets go to bad, it's more than any of us want to pay. So the context of a quality street maintenance program is keeping the good streets good. And to Trey's point, if you're crack sealing and you're protecting the base, that's the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever be able to buy against that road. And so the more you neglect your infrastructure, the more you defer that maintenance, the more you're guaranteed to spend in order to bring it back to good. So we'll be talking about a maintenance plan that we'll pay for out of the general fund, that sole purpose is to keep the good streets good.
Okay, I'm 100% on board, agree completely, with the exception that if the cracks are being caused by the drainage not being taken care of.
I agree. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and the truck driving and doing the intensity on the pavement can't tell that the core problem is the drainage isn't repaired.
Correct.
So if that's the exception, you're not really maintaining the street. It really is good money after bad if the drainage isn't addressed at all, because you're losing the subgrade.
Absolutely right. That's what we're going to fix with that drainage fee. We come in and make sure everything's
So,
running.
I can't imagine that the car driving can do it, so I would assume that's where you and Jerry come in, that there's going to have to be some, okay, we're not spending money on this street, even though it makes this criteria, because we've got to address the drainage.
So let's
before we
go to
put
the end
overlay.
so the mayor can chill.
You're absolutely right.
The bottom line is we're going to get some policy direction tonight. And then between now and when you adopt this budget, they're going to have traffic counters on every street. They're going to walk every street. We're going to evaluate in camera the lines, water and wastewater, that we know we're going to invest money in. So if they have to be fixed, we're fixing that first. We know we're going to be getting a drainage crew, and so we're going to be evaluating that. And those are some of the projects where we're going to go in and do drainage first. We'll then replace the water and wastewater, and then we'll put the roads in. We have identified some areas where we know we're going to do that. And so the tour that we're going to suggest at the end of this, we want to have at the end of July. Because we have been out there and we have looked at some areas where we know we can make a huge difference by going in and fixing the drainage, going in and replacing the water and wastewater lines. We've got a grant to do that, so we need to leverage our opportunities, and then put the street in. Well, no good deed goes unpunished. And so I don't want y'all to get a false sense of security sitting up here that we're finally getting it right. We're going to leverage all of this money, and this is going to be great. So we've been out and have ridden and stopped and looked. We have mailboxes in the right-of-way that I suspect have been there for 20 or 30 years. I suspect that some of the fences that are significantly encroaching in our right-of-way have been there 15 or 20 years. The city had never said anything about that. We went and looked at some drainage easements we know we have to improve, and there's some accessory buildings there, some sheds. You look at them and tell they've been there 20 or 30 years, and the city's never said a word to me. And so now y'all are going to come in and make us move all this? Every one of those mailboxes, fences, accessory structures is a telephone call to each one of you. And y'all are going to get hammered. Even when we build a really good community engagement and we go out there, I know what they're going to tell you. Yeah, I went to that meeting. I didn't know they were talking to me. And they're going to call you. So we're going to go out and we're going to walk, we're going to point, we're going to look, and I'm back to what is your threshold for pain? Because at the end of the day, they're going to light us up. We're going to be doing good. We know it's the right thing to do, and we're doing exactly what the citizens have asked us to do. But they didn't realize how personal it was going to get. And so we're looking for some policy decisions tonight because that's going to dictate the plan that we bring back in that detail, and it will then dictate what we go and show you on our July tour. So not only are we going to do exactly what the mayor's going to say wants done, but we're going to put you in a bus and we're going to show you where it's going to be done. And then y'all have a time to reconcile in your mind, is this really what you want to do before we ask you to vote? So we're going to do reality. And then based on that information, Trey and his team are going to put together a 7-year plan. So we're going to tell you every year for the next 7 years how we're going to spend the money you've allocated. So when your constituent calls and said, how come they're not on my street, you will have adopted that plan in the budget. You'll be able to go to your budget book and say, well, that's because you're in year 3 and we're only in year 1. We're going to get to you. So that's how the story ends.
Exactly right. And another good way to look at this, if you're not familiar with roads and structures, is this is just keeping a roof on your house, right? So you want to take care of the foundation, you want to take care of the house, change the roof every so often. Asphalt is just like that. You might need a patch or a crack seal on the roof. Exactly the same thing. You're preserving everything underneath it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
When we start doing this work and we run into the building that's in the right of way or the list of 3, can we have a targeted program to approach these people before we start the work? So
yes, and that's the community engagement process.
Okay.
And so we will bring that to you so that y'all can vet it and make sure that we're doing all of that. And our goal is we will go into next year knowing exactly where we're going to be working and when. Because in order to do what we've talked about, the drainage has to be done before the water and wastewater can get in there. And then once you get through with that, you got to very quickly then come back in with the road. So we are going to have to be scheduled pretty tight. And so we've pledged in the drainage fund to work in zones a certain number of times. And so it's going to require a lot of planning, but a lot of stick-to-itiveness to the calendar. And that is Curtis Hancock's wheelhouse. And so that was part of the reason we were excited to promote Curtis, is because this is something he's very good. He can put together a plan, he can execute that plan, and he keeps the guys on task very well. So what that's going to allow us to do is months in advance meet with that neighborhood and tell them that we're going to be here. And these are the issues you need to fix, and you got 3 months or 5 months or whatever to get it fixed. So we're not showing up on Friday, we're going to be here on Monday, and oh, by the way, you got to move your mailbox. So we're going to try to eliminate that as much as possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
So as Linda and I adjusted these slides back and forth in that agenda share folder, and as she said, don't teach them the entire craft, but I'm also wanted to make sure we did touch on some of this because you're going to see tons of different kinds of maintenance. And if somebody says, well, you came in completely put an a seal coat on my road, it's nice and black and shiny, the paint lines are fresh. Why does mine look like that? Because it hasn't met that year 4 to 7 or whatever's in that cycle. This is still a great road. It just needed a little bit of attention.
So, I've been doing this a long time, so back up one slide. So you want to know what's going to make your phone ring? We're going to go out on a street or two, I'm sure, and we're going to have to put a lot of crack seal on it, but it's super cheap. Somebody's going to come and stand at the podium and complain to you that their street now looks like spider web. And so all of these things are going to generate questions and concerns. So part of what we will start doing is doing news stories, social media videos, talking about what is crack sealing, why is it important, and begin to run these in advance of when we'll be out there so we can anticipate those questions that are legitimate. If you don't understand street maintenance, it's an obvious question. I left this morning, my street was fine, I come home and it looks like Charlotte's Web. What happened? And so those are things we need to anticipate and talk about.
Here I just have different examples of for pavement preservation and the different types you could see. This is that thin overlay mix we talked about, that high density mineral bond. Again, this is just an overlay, and then that's a chip seal, which is something that we don't do very often, but we may talk to the county about negotiating certain areas of town that are a little more rural, and absolutely that'd be a perfect application. Again, just more examples of a slurry seal, that mineral bond. This is a great example of somebody coming year 3 doing a crack seal, and then coming back at year 7 and laying that over in the pavement, never deteriorating. So pothole patching as a whole, this is just, we've defined it. We're going to do some follow-up repairs. First, we may see some of that throw-and-go patchwork that everybody sees and you run over with the truck tire, just to take care of some liability. But I'm going to have these, they come back and they'll do a standard size, and I have 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 inches deep. However, it'll be a foot into wherever the last crack actually is. So if it's deteriorated 3 feet, we're actually going to make it 4 by 4, something like that. This is just a basic something we had to.
So for educational purposes, let's break this down just a little bit. We are immune with governmental liability as long as we reasonably take care of our business. And so when we get a complaint for a pothole, then we have a responsibility to promptly repair that pothole. So the liability management is that they'll go in and put some hot mix in it, and it won't be a spot that we'll be proud of, but it's fixed the liability. And then what will happen is that Curtis will schedule that throw and go patch, and it'll be scheduled, and we'll come back and do a standard pothole repair that looks like this. And I bring this to your attention because we're sitting here telling you that we're going to do 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 inches, and somebody's going to say, but you didn't do that over here. No, we didn't, because we were managing litigation, our liability, until we can come back and do it right. So there will be a lapse for us to manage that.
And that's what your cold mix is for, and it's probably there till the first big rain and it's gone. Full depth repairs, this is a little more definition on that. Again, it's a high priority because we want to make sure we can get that subgrade fixed so it doesn't deteriorate any longer. It's great before you do a seal coat of some sort. And again, it's just the standard depth would be, I'm going to say 5 by 5, just something we use for budgeting numbers basically. And then 10 inches deep. It can be much longer than that, but when it gets over 40% of the roadway, it's no longer eligible for that maintenance. It's into the reconstruction or rehab.
This is why maintenance is really important, because your trash trucks do this, your school buses do this. If you have a maintenance program and you have maintenance funding and these pop up, you can go in and you can fix the problem on a very small scale. But if you don't, in every one of these houses, the trash truck stops and he starts creating this rut, and you've got houses spaced apart, and you begin to get a lot of these. That's that 40% mark that Trey's talking about, where we took a street that we could have protected and added a whole lot of life because we had some maintenance money, or we can ignore these and that road got real expensive real quick. So this is a great example of why you really need to have a good maintenance program.
And then if you were actually doing something in the concrete, we would just dow it in at 12 inches on center number 4 rebar, dow it in so far and re-pour it. This is another example of reclamation. So this may be a great tool that we would do on, we just need to come in, re-pour the base, lay it back in, maybe add some rock. Great tool. I've done a lot of this work in previous cities. And it really is going to depend on what we do. Again, we'll talk a little about the concrete maintenance. That's an example of a full depth repair there for concrete on your right. And this is the kind of maintenance where they would just crack seal. It's joint sealing actually. Filling in those concrete joints so that the water doesn't get underneath them and they begin to pump and they move and crack and stuff like that. This is a perfect example. Austin Street was built 2012, 2013. You can see we've done some crack seal on it a couple of years. But you can really see some deterioration on some of that base and some of that pavement. And so it's about 4 or 5 years old, and it's getting time to change that surface. And you can see how much more drastic this is in the other 2 pictures I showed earlier. By the way, this is what that paver software looks like. I don't know if I explained that earlier, but when they drove the streets that they give us, as you plug this in, you can actually drive every road. You can see that intensity view. You can see the pictures that they took as they went through. What they don't do for you is go actually measure those cracks, which is why we got to go out on the street and get those numbers for you for a really solid budget number. This is just an example of how you would extend your pavement life. This is actually a 10-year plan, how long they would last. So when you have your initial start here and your street's in a great shape, you're going to do a surface treatment, an overlay, and you can see it extends that life out quite a bit in pavement. This is exactly what you're looking for. I think they're a little optimistic with an 80-year pavement. Maybe that's concrete, but I don't think so. It's just another chart, and I was going to go back over the examples with crack sealing, fog sealing, the generic seal coat, and that asphalt overlay. That's where we're really going to be working in that 10 to 6 area. This is the examples. This is just the types that you would see. The joint sealing we talked about, the slab lifting, which is a great way to do that. They come in, drill a hole, level the slab back up, reseal everything. It's a great job. And some concrete restoration where we actually cut out a section or 4. This is the average cost approximately for these in this current year. You can see the maintenance for just a crack seal. It's $1,500 a lane mile. We talked about what that lane mile was earlier. So at 5,280 feet by 11, there may be 2.5 of those in each road. So you would take that number, figure out what your lane miles are, and that's where you come up with this budget number. Again, fog seal about 6, seal coat 18, but you can see the drastic drive in the maintenance area. So depending on the type of maintenance you do when you actually go out there and boots on the ground, you say, well, this has got so much deterioration. We did this much math, and so that range is huge, and it's hard to give you a really tight number without going out there before that July like we talked about. Again, our plan will be to have a 7-year maintenance cycle. So what you would do is you would start with that visual inspection year 1 after that road is built. That 3rd year, you're doing a crack seal. And that 5th year, you're already bringing that truck back out to drive those roads because we want to have updated data every 5 years. So you're going to do a condition index every 5. So then at year 7, we put that kind of seal coat we talked about. Generic, again, whichever one we decide, depends on the pavement, it depends on the base. You start that visual inspection every year. Your crack sealing again at year 11. And I have no doubt if something like that starts, you can extend that asphalt pavement to a 28-year life, easy. And that's where you start making your money back, because you've really spent a lot of low-cost dollars in this first 15 to 21 years. I'm going back through just to reiterate what those lane miles look like, because everybody says, hey, we only had 12 miles of street. Well, that lane mile, 12.9 in exit condition is actually 32.25 because we multiply by 2.5. And depending on whatever, and this will be another policy decision we talk about later, but depending on whatever your streets look like in your right-of-way plan, 28, 32, 48 feet wide, that increases those lane miles. So you can see how I've broken these down just for the budget numbers. The one at the top, so I know somebody's going to catch this, the numbers are actually a little high, but that's assuming that we have all our streets in excellent condition, and because they're going to be moving up to that layer. That's a super low amount to keep up with just to maintain the roads. We want to put that crack seal number up there. And then I took a range from 35,000 to 55,000 to actually come up with this amount. So for the bare streets that we have may require more full depth repair, may not, and they may actually, we're not exactly sure without going out there. So what you end up with is anywhere from that 129 to 203, and I think we can come in the budget range of 320,000 to 390,000. Again, we'll talk about.
No.
Oh, so 1 cent of revenue, of tax rate generates approximately $87,000. Tracy's the guru with this, not me, but she told me this number was okay. So this is when we want to talk about that policy discussion. And that's 4 pennies there generates the $348,000. That puts us real close, right in the middle of our range.
So let's talk about this. Last year, y'all made a public pronouncement that you're willing to raise taxes. One of the things that I think is important when we raise taxes is we need to be able to show our taxpayers what they got for that money. And so what I would offer to you is this. If you are interested in raising taxes, I would request that you dedicate it specifically to street maintenance. So when Tracy gets the tax information from the tax appraiser, there will be 3 numbers that you will be given. There will be the INS, that is your debt, and that's where all of our debt funding goes. The O&M piece is the general fund, and then there would be a third piece that would be a separate street maintenance fund. And that fund would very clearly specify with a purpose of however much of the tax rate you dedicate to street maintenance, so that every year as our value of each penny grows, that money goes into the street maintenance fund to maintain the streets at the policy level y'all have set. So if you want to bite it off in 1 year, it's 4 pennies. If that's not what you want to do, whatever you tell us, we're going to bring you back a budget with 3 funds: a debt fund, a general fund, and a street maintenance fund, should you choose to pursue this. So at this point in time, we're not asking necessarily for your best and final offer, but I do need some policy direction. So as we build the plan this summer, we understand what that might look like. And if not a number, then we just need y'all to talk and visit so we can find somewhere to go.
It seems only fair to start on this end. Councilmember Ennis, comments?
I've got to digest this before I can work on policy.
So let me reframe the policy question. Because y'all were pretty adamant that y'all were willing to raise taxes. Is raising taxes to a dedicated purpose appealing, or just to raise taxes to take care of everything? I think that might be a good place to start.
Yes, it's appealing for dedicated. I just need to take a look at all these figures, and I see $348,000, and maybe I need to go back and say, okay, what's that going to get us? And
Go back.
That was on the previous slide, right?
Go back.
There you go.
So what Trey has done is, and that goes back to the premise of the good streets good. So we have about 136.5 lane miles that are in excellent condition. And the way you keep an excellent street excellent is crack sealing. So what you want to do is aggressive crack sealing about every 3 years so you can protect that base. That's the cheapest street maintenance you can do. So we've got about 56.95 miles in good condition. And so what you want to do is take your good streets, and about every 7 years, you want to go in and seal them. So what you see is 1 lane mile of seal. He's estimating at about $14,750 a lane mile. So if you take 56.57 lane miles, and to seal it is $14,750 a mile, and you divide that by doing it once every 7 years, you need about $120,000 a year to keep your good streets in good condition. We've got about 25.95 lane miles of fair condition. And these are the streets that are becoming more expensive that we need to do something with to keep them from falling off to poor. And when you get in the poor, now we're really talking expensive rehabilitation or reconstruction. And so we have figured that we need somewhere between about $130,000 and $200,000 a year in order to make that work. And that's part of what Trey is saying. Until they get out in the field and they really evaluate what this looks like, it's a range. And it's a $100,000 spread. So it's a guesstimate at this point, but we're just trying to give you a scope of magnitude number. So we started with, you keep the good streets good, you fund maintenance out of general fund, you don't finance that debt. So to keep our streets that are good, excellent, or in fair condition maintained at an appropriate level, we need somewhere between $320,000 to $390,000. And the reason that has to be reoccurring money is it doesn't last long enough to bond. So when we get to the streets that are poor and very poor, then we will issue tax notes, or we can do some kind of certificate of obligation or general obligation to fix those. And we do have some debt capacity coming at us in future years where we'll be able to program these streets and make a dent in them. But we've got to be fiscally responsible with what dollars we use to maintain our system. So if we were to do what we needed to do to keep the excellent streets great, good streets good, and get some more GUI out of the fair condition, we need between $320,000 and $390,000. So when you go to the next slide, and it's
Go back. On the fair condition, you don't, did you also divide by 7 years?
Yes, and this is one of those slides that I didn't get to recover quick enough.
And I knew that was,
but
my assumption was
this is
it was
actually
7.
that range of $35,000 to $55,000,
Right.
which makes a huge difference in the cost.
Huge.
And you've got to remember, there's some factors of once these become good, they drop into this category.
Right.
Once these become excellent, or once a street in poor condition becomes excellent, it drops into this category. So you're going to have.
So it's going to change, and that's why you do the PCI update.
That's
but
correct.
and I knew you had files blending, but I want to make sure that if those of us that are looking at this file right now,
Yes.
that third number was also divided by 7 years.
That's correct.
And
That is
because
absolutely
of the
correct.
range, because you haven't had an opportunity to walk them all, even with the dividing by 7 years, there's still $100,000 a year swing. There's a lot of unknowns.
That's correct. And
Okay.
and just to let you know, I just ran some quick calculations on your overall streets. If you were to go through and replace everything that we have for some catastrophic event, you're looking at around $150 million street inventory. So to put just a tiny bit of money into it to make sure it stays in that $150 million position it's a great investment.
So, Councilmember Ennis, you indicated that the idea of potentially doing a tax increase to a dedicated fund is not something that you're adamantly opposed to, that you would consider that.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson, let's do that question first. What do you think?
I have no objection because I'm a proponent of maintenance. So we need to do whatever we can to maintain our streets. And while it's on the edge of my mind, I don't think we have any pipe bursting in the radar right now. But
Yes.
I do know
We do. I'll talk about that in a later slide.
Okay, got a later slide, but I want to throw this out there while I'm thinking about it. The pipe bursting is a good thing, but we need to hold our contractors accountable for their compaction, because I know some areas that are already sinking, and they started sinking right after the project.
And that comes down to good construction inspection. And
Absolutely.
me and Jerry have had many discussions about that. So there may not have always been a good eye watching it before, but we're going to make sure that happens.
Very good, thank you.
Great point, Councilmember Peterson. Councilmember Nelson?
Yeah, certainly whenever you want to spend money, you want to show your constituents something tangible, what they're spending money on. And there's nothing more tangible within the city than street infrastructure, so, yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Schiff?
I think it's a very reasonable plan.
So one of the questions that I think a citizen would ask me right away is, how much are you spending on maintenance now?
$21,000 a year.
So that's just nearly zero in these numbers, which is
When
why.
you've got how many $1 million set of
So previously, there has been some years where we have increased the street budget, but it's generally for a project related. But maintenance, yeah, by the time I got here, there was never more than $20,000 spent a year.
and the infrastructure is worth how many million?
150.
$150 million resource we invest $21,000 in.
So, and I'll tell you, that's just enough to buy the patch material to put down the road.
That's why the majority of it has been throw and go, with the exception
That's
of
absolutely
one-time
correct.
projects, because that's all you have budgeted.
And in your math, you see some of these are fairly new in-house, and that's where we got a chance to take some of that extra money, go build a road, and we leveraged it with a wastewater project, and made the best of it, and brought some of these streets into better shape.
Well, and I made this comment the last time we talked about, I think it was at the water and wastewater workshop where Councilmember Schiff was ready to just raise those wastewater rates by $10 a year for 3 years. For me, this conversation has to be in context of total for a household.
Absolutely.
Because, 4 cents for streets, you're talking about adding a drainage fee, you're talking about raising wastewater rates, we're going to have to raise water rates. So for me personally, when we look at the budget, I'm not saying that those things don't have to be done, but I think it behooves us to be able to say to a citizen, this is the impact of your household.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a method to this madness, and we've talked about that, and we've talked about the very thing that the mayor has indicated. We are working feverishly to not do anything in a vacuum, to not make a decision in a silo. And so I don't want you to say, well, I wouldn't have raised wastewater if I'd known we'd had this. And so what we are attempting to do is to bring you the structural challenges that prevent us from having capacity, that prevent us from getting ahead. Because if you've got a $51 million asset and you're only investing $21,000, you're just, every year you don't do something, that problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it is a big number. And so what, again, we're just trying to do is scope of magnitude. And maybe the question, and I appreciate this is seriously unfair, but we've got to be able to answer the question the mayor's posed. So in priority order, I think we can all agree that flushing the toilets and running water is absolutely non-negotiable. We also have drainage that we know has to be addressed. We're not going to be prepared this budget year to bring you a solution. In order to really fix drainage, we talked about at the February 20th meeting all of the questions that we have to answer. Is what does fix look like? What drainage standards are we going to build to? So that's going to be one of those issues that, even though it's hugely important for the community, we owe it the same solution-oriented outcome that we've provided for water, wastewater. And what we've provided for you tonight is the solution. What we are working hard to do is to get out of trading one problem for another and treating symptoms. And so at the end of this budget year, we're going to be able to talk to you about drainage. And in order to fix the drainage at the street level, we know what the drainage crew is going to cost. We also know that when y'all get ready to do some of those big drainage projects, that we may need to raise that drainage fee, but that's a future thing. We have resolved the water wastewater. We're now in the part of executing that plan. and we need to understand street maintenance. So we know water, wastewater is important, so maybe that will help as y'all noodle what the right answer is what's your prioritization, and how do you prioritize things that we really shouldn't have to prioritize, but that's where we're at. Because part of the end game is we need to bring you something that you'll adopt. So let me ask this as a potential stopgap. We have budget meetings scheduled in June. We have budget meetings scheduled in July. We're going to add a tour. And then we've got some workshops in August. So in June, scheduled for our June workshop, we're going to talk about the Old Iron Bridge. Tomorrow, the CIP survey results are going to be due, and so we're going to bring those survey results to you in June so that you can begin to get a sense of what the community is interested in as far as a capital improvement program looks like. Would you like us to bring this back to you at that time to give y'all a couple of months to visit and begin to think about what you're willing to do? Because we really need to have some direction a couple of months before budget adoption in order to bring you a plan. And I think it's hugely important that if we're going to raise taxes, we need to show the community what they're going to get. And when are we going to get to you? So whatever the parameters you give us, that 7-year plan might become a 10-year plan. And we'll have to factor in how many more streets are we going to lose because we're not stopping the bleeding. But is that a comfortable benchmark, is to put this back on the agenda in June and have a more thoughtful conversation relative to some direction so we can build that plan?
I'm not asking Gary. Lyle Nelson?
Sure, I'm ready for it.
Councilmember Nelson, Peterson, Ennis, do you think June? Ready to, and what I would encourage you guys to do, and I know I don't have to encourage you because I know you would do that anyway, this is a lot to take in if you've never seen it before, so send your questions to the city manager, and I'm sure she'll do it. You know, Lyle, if you ask her a question, she'll send the answer to everybody so we keep everybody on the same page. There, and I mean about questions about as you're going through this presentation.
One of the things that I'm willing to do, because I appreciate that Gary and Connie have a way different understanding. If y'all would like to schedule personal tours, Trey and I'll put you in the truck, and we'll take you and we'll drive and we'll talk and we'll get out and look and help you really appreciate the challenge that's out there and educate you, not from words on a page, but what does this look like in the field? When we say this, here's what this looks like, and drive you around, and so you get a really good sense of when it's a red street. I know what a red street looks like. I've been on one, and you'll be able to talk about it. And if you think that would be helpful to you, we're happy to do that, because this is such a huge topic and it's hugely important to the citizens. So we'll offer that in addition to the answering the questions, if that would be helpful.
I know I can do the math, and I'm trying to do it in my head, but I know because I've been working on a presentation, and Ms. Waldron's been extremely helpful with that. With our current tax rate, the average single-family residential home value in the city of Bastrop right now is $170,000, and at our current tax rate, that's $959 a year. So
is that yesterday or today?
I
Before
hear
or
ya.
after?
I hear you. So, and that's one thing. I know she won't have new prices in June, but she would have them eventually. And I know there's kind of the cart and the horse. But where I'm going with all of this is, to me, one of the things I would like to know is, if we raise it a penny, how much more is that for an average homeowner? If we raise it 2 pennies, you know, kind of be able to visually understand what the conversation is, because that's separate from understanding everything about the roadway. And I know it's not that hard, but I would think in June, Ms. Umbel, when you bring it back, that we need to be looking at it at that picture. I would think that would be helpful. Councilmember Ennis?
I'm concerned about the holistic angle of it, with new drainage fees and raising 4 cents taxes and all the other things that we've got on the plate. I'd like to know what the yearly cost is going to be.
$68. If you take it at the existing tax rate at $170,000 thousand, you raised it 4 cents, it's $68 a year or 18 cents a day. And so $68 divided by 12, it's about $5.60 a month. And for some folks, that's a lot of money.
That's right. And the other thing, as folks on the street are, I'm sure they remind me on a regular basis, and I'm sure they remind you as well. That's great that you held the tax rate the same, but my valuations have gone up. So at the end of the day, I'm writing a check for more money. So if the evaluations are going up and you're raising my tax rate, I need to feel good about it's more than just that one number. So we need to be able to Councilmember Ennis's point, it's the holistic, what's the money coming in, and then it's holistically the impact to each of our homeowners. That's not saying that it's not a great project, and I also know there's a point that if we say, okay, you can have a quarter of a penny, that's the same as saying no. So one of the things I need to have back in June is to do this, is it 4 cents or don't talk to me? Or is it, hey, now it's June, we've walked some more roads, some of these are gonna be, that $100,000, has that come down at all? Or realize that if you only do 2 cents, we're not touching reconstruct, is there a middle ground?
So,
and maybe the answer is no, there's not a middle ground, but we need to know that.
And what you do is, if you look, remember that slide we had where your percentage was at? We just move it up the road and we take care of everything that's good or excellent and up. And we let, in the streets that are in the serious and the failed, you take care of that in bonds, but the stuff that's right on the edge, it's gonna deteriorate really quickly, and that you just let it go.
And I don't want you to do 1,000
No,
iterations, but I think maybe, because I think what you're giving us is, if we had all the money in the world, this is the right way to do it. And so I think it's reasonable to say, is there anything we can maybe cut back on that? Mayor Pro Tem Schiff?
After we get the certified tax roll, we may recalculate this and say, hey, the appraised values will offset the tax increase, and we don't really need to do the tax increase.
And I think
or maybe it takes care of one of the pennies and another penny is the Cadillac version or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I think the question is how much of that tax rate, whatever you move it up and down, do you want to dedicate to street maintenance?
Exactly.
That's the policy question.
And I
Not
understand.
raising, but do you want to dedicate 3 cents?
I understand.
And so that we're clear, this is not our plan.
No.
This is good practice. This is benchmark the way you do it. This is not Linda and Trey championing to raise 4 cents. This is, you said you had a street maintenance problem and you wanted a solution. That's what we brought you. And to the mayor's question is, if we only gave you half a penny, is that better than nothing? The answer to that is yes, because we can't do much at all with 21,000. So if we got double that, we can do a little more crack sealing than we were doing yesterday, and we've saved one street we wouldn't otherwise save. And so whatever the answer is, it's better than where we're at. But the philosophy that I think gets cities in trouble is we owe you the truth. And the truth of the matter is you've got a $51 million asset that you're spending $21,000 a year on to maintain. $151 million. So at the end of the day, to resolve that, it's $340,000. So now what you have is a scope of magnitude on what it would take to do it right. So anything between $21,000 and $349,000 is falling forward. Okay, because it's more money we have next year than we have this year. Another thing that we've not talked about that we're going to begin challenging is financial stewardship and financial sustainability. Because sometimes our streets are designed and built to a level because that's the way everybody else does it. But the truth of the matter is you don't have to build a street with 4 lanes divided in concrete and all of that. And we build huge roads because that's what you do. But you don't have to do that. We've got roads downtown that are nice asphalt, the concrete ribbon, bar ditches, they drain great, and they'll last forever. Not a thing wrong with any of them. On some of our less traveled streets, and that's why the traffic counts become important. You see it out in the county. They put down a great rock base and they seal it. It's just fine. And if you're not going to have heavy traffic, why would you invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in a road that could be something less than that, be perfectly fine and meet its needs? So part of the internal conversation we are having is challenging, do you put back what's there, or do you put back something that's less that you can afford to maintain and it functions as well or better? And so not only is the question going to be how much do we want to spend in taxes, but we may bring you back some choices that says this street is this today, but we've done the traffic count. And something that is built to a lesser standard that we can maintain and functions way better because we can maintain it, and yes, it's cheaper to maintain, may absolutely be the answer.
That may also take care of some of those mailboxes that are, so that's what we got to apply some common sense to the science of the road pavement, in my opinion. Any comments from council members? Councilmember Nelson?
I'm a strong proponent of preventative maintenance. Now, the preventative maintenance is the key. We cannot continue to defer any of these projects to further down the street, or we're just going to exacerbate our problem. I'm in agreement with Councilman Ennis that we need to look at this in a holistic approach, but to do nothing or do the bare minimum is not serving our constituents the way they need to be served. So I still want us to look at this at a very pragmatic approach with an eye toward an ongoing process, as opposed to just saying let's quell the ways and cries of a few citizens and fix this project, rather than approaching it at the entire city approach as y'all have presented. I really appreciate the presentation, but to defer these projects is not in my wheelhouse, I guarantee you.
So from the prioritization standpoint, we've talked about it, but I want to reiterate just so you appreciate the mechanics of how this is going to work. There's a lot of work between now and bringing you back a plan. Trey and his team are going to have to go out and put traffic counts on all of our streets, because if we've got just a small amount of money, our argument to you would be, let's invest it on the streets most traveled. So that the benefit goes to more than just a less. We also want to look at the PCI scores, because the less money you give us, the more money we're going to invest in excellent streets. And I can tell you from having done this, that is not acceptable to the citizens who have had a bad street forever, and you tell them we don't have money to fix their streets and no plans to get on it. As far as they're concerned, you have wasted tonight and not solved the problem. The project leveraging, that goes back to what Councilmember Peterson was talking about with pipe bursting and other things. When we know we're going to be in an area working, how can we maximize the monies we're going to spend for the various alternatives and maximize that? And then once that happens, toward the end of July, we're going to take you on that bus trip, because as they're out in the field, they're going to be noticing the one-up things that are going to create the issues, because it's never the big things, it's the little things. Had a council member one time describe it, it doesn't matter until it's your ox being gored in the ditch, and then it becomes hugely important. So they're going to go out and do their work. We're going to talk about it in June to kind of get a scope of to what level do y'all want us to build a plan, and then we'll take the trip in July, so that when we bring you back in August a budget with this in it, you will have debated it philosophically, which tonight is what's happening. What does good maintenance look like? We will bring you a plan based on your funding level, and identify to the extent we can the issues that are going to be created with that, so that when you make a final decision in September, you're making an informed decision, and that's what we're striving for.
And it's, yeah, absolutely. This is not the end, but I know there'll be a lot more discussions about this. Just wanted to point out again, the street performance and those numbers will be important, but also whatever your classification is, if it's arterial or residential and things of that nature. That's where you get to make those choices, how wide they are, what they look like, if there can be rules or open ditch, things like that. And then that maintenance history, which actually isn't in the surface, we don't have a whole lot of it, is going to be key to making sure that those things are done. Because once you're new, year 3, you're automatically on that crack suit list. So when you hear, hey, you just built that, well, we did, but now we have to come in and maintain it. So we'll be here at 3, we'll be here at 7, or 10, or whatever we decide. And again, that's just a conversation you're going to have.
So I'm going to pick this one. Part of the challenge that we have is that BDC passed a bond totaling $750,000 to fix Main Street. And Sarah is consistently getting worn out every day about when are we going to fix Main Street. So we owe you this conversation. Main Street is considered fair. If you apply good practices, it doesn't qualify for the reconstruction that you got money sitting in the bank for. So if you reconstruct a fair street with $750,000, and I live on a fair street and you tell me I don't get that, I'm going to be interested in how come. So we have postponed this conversation in the public until you had complete information from which to make a decision.
And that doesn't mean that it doesn't receive anything.
That's right.
But it doesn't get completely reclaimed and rebuilt. And I just want to point one more thing out, because this is important. This is the same section of road from 2008, and the same section of road from 2000 until today. And if you'll look, the only difference really is the parking. This is actually 2016, I think, so we're a little behind. The stretches are pretty much exactly the same. The only improvement that was done sometime in between there was adding the islands. We've changed the parking. Again, something I thought was worth pointing out.
And so your recommended treatment for this is what?
The recommended treatment, we would come in here and clean this up, do some patch repair, maybe some full depth if we needed, and then completely seal the thing with some kind of high-density mineral bond and restripe it.
And do you have a cost estimate on that yet? I thought you would have one until you said the high-density mineral bond.
I know how much it is a mile, but I'd have to go out and do some width. But it wouldn't take long to whip one up.
But what you're willing to say is it's not going to cost $750,000.
No, it's not. That's correct.
But there was also a plan to do infrastructure, to do new sewer and water.
I have looked at all the infrastructure in there.
We've actually cambered the lines.
Yeah, the only section that actually is served off of Main Street is this block here, which is south of Main, and it's just for a small portion. Everyone else is served off Alley D, and actually when we rebuilt that parking lot, I purposely put a loop in, so that could probably come off time if we had to, so you could probably just do it. And I went back and looked at all the sewer and water calls, and there were very minimal work orders in the last 8 years.
So I have a question and a comment. The comment is the thing that people complain to me about more than anything else.
Just the way it looks.
They can't tell where to park. If it's raining, the striping is, you can't tell what's old striping and what's faded striping. So the idea, if you're going to do a seal coat on it, then you would restripe it, and then you would be doing the seal coat over the old
Have you gotten that recently? Because y'all went out and striped it.
Probably last 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But some of the blacked out lines are confusing. I agree. Some people will just park in the black line. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I understand.
And here's how it works, and we all know this. It's dark. Whoever parks the first way, everybody else parks that way. Right. So all you need is one person who can't clearly see where to go, or remembers the last time they were here it was a different way. But so that's the deal. My question is, was the $750,000, because I wasn't around when BEDC did that, is it dedicated to road maintenance, or is it specific to Main Street?
We asked this question, and Tracy, I need you to come to the mic.
In the bond documents, it was not specific to Main Street, it was specific to the infrastructure, but I do want to say that included the sidewalks as well. I mean, that was part of that whole it wasn't just the street, it was, the sidewalks were also part of that bond.
Part of the challenge with the sidewalks is we own some of them and we don't own some of them. And so part of the challenge that you've got is meeting the constitutional intent of you cannot put public money on private property. So if the intent is to continue with that project, we're going to need to do some extensive research and figure out how all of that looks like, and then y'all will have to make some policy choices about whether you buy it or you want an easement or whatever. But there are some places that are privately owned, and we constitutionally cannot improve private property with public money.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Schiff.
Yeah, I know that City Manager Talbot spent a lot of time and effort in trying to secure those sidewalk areas that were not city-owned, and I don't know where that process stands, but
They never got more than 40%.
They only got 40%, Trey said.
So there was quite a bit of time. There was one point, just to give you some history. I don't know if you were on the board then or not, but they were going to cut it off if they didn't reach by a certain time that date. Back around, they still continue to try to get them. Sarah could probably tell you a lot more, but we have not gotten all those easements successfully. That's what I can tell you. And it may have increased from 40 to 60 by now, but it's still 40% away from a lot of folks. So that's the policy decisions you'll talk about.
Well,
But it doesn't mean
the
you can't
whole
do
point
something.
is, and I know you guys, I mean, that's not the complete topic for tonight, but we've got to be clear about what was voted on, what we can spend money on,
Yes.
what we can't, and if
That's
any
right.
of that money can be spent on another road or whatever. And Gary, did you get the answer that you wanted as far as utilities? So you, because I heard you
I'm
say you
comfortable there.
pulled the line
Yeah.
and
I mean,
you
if
can.
if the utilities don't need to be replaced, then we shouldn't be replacing them. That's
Correct.
Curtis and his crew, and in fact, Curtis was extremely impressed and bragged on them in a meeting with Trey and I. They have gone out and actually mapped not only the lines, but where the connections are. And so they've got some of the best as-built drawings of our utilities downtown that we've ever had. And that happened several months ago, so it's a fairly recent thing.
and I can't remember exactly, but it seemed like a big portion of, or the big push on the underground utilities was a water main that runs down Main Street that feeds the rest of town or something.
So I replaced all those water mains while we were in Alley D and made a loop from the next street water, which could technically take out that section,
Okay.
because I connected it in spots where it was never connected before, so now it circulates good enough, we wouldn't have to keep that line.
So is it appropriate for me to say that in June, we will bring you back an explanation of the Main Street project, an update on the sidewalks, and our response to the community is that we're having a holistic conversation about streets, and council will make a decision this summer on what it will do relative to that $750,000.
Council, are you comfortable with that? Looking for? Okay. Okay. You're getting nods, yes. Thank you.
So again, the only section that might require rehab, because I don't want to say there wouldn't be any, would be that section south of Pine. That's the worst section of Main Street from there to 71. This is Walnut. Actually, something we've done in-house in a picture of Farm Street. If you remember Farm before, it was narrow, and this is the same spot in front of the school. We actually widened the road here, changed the surface type to concrete. There's a good before and after shot, but the traffic counts were huge because of the school. So that was really a big indicator to get that moving forward. So again, we prioritize on the traffic counts. The pavement condition for Farm was horrible shape. This was probably the best looking section that was left.
So what money funded that
What money funded what?
It was a bond.
farm?
It was a bond for the entire.
It was a road
Yes.
bond? Okay.
It was actually a bond for the water, wastewater, and
And
each fund paid a separate.
I think Trey mentioned this earlier, and we didn't focus on it, but that's the way street maintenance has happened, is there would be bond money issued, and they'd go in and fix a street somewhere.
And I'll tell you, the original request for budget, because I'm sure nobody's aware of this anymore, was 1.2 to finish. The council made a decision to give the 800, 900,000, whatever it was, and we stopped at the last two blocks that go to the park. So those sections are not done. They're designed, but they never were built because we didn't fund the rest. We just had to make a cutoff decision in the highest traffic area, and the area that needed the most parking was right there in front of the school, so we did that first, and we can fund the rest later. Again, we were able to leverage that with some projects because the water and wastewater lines did need to be replaced. And again, we will do that again if the utilities are required to be changed in another area. There was also some drainage issues there that we had to fix that nobody had taken care of. This is another project that I think would be a great priority. This is what we were talking about earlier. We received a letter. We haven't got any grant money yet. We received a letter saying we will get some grant money. And the first part of it is some engineering study and feasibility. In this area of town, Magnolia Water, between Maine, Maple, all of those lines are in pretty poor shape. The water and wastewater lines, so they have really high inflow. A lot of old concrete and clay sewer pipes. And what we've done is we actually got some funding to replace those. We applied for a grant to replace those. Again, that's also an area of drainage work. Map. This is the infrastructure that runs right through that neighborhood where those garages and accessory structures are built over the top of them. So we'll be able to go in there. We're already going to be in that area working and cleaning it up. We're already be in the area the water and sewer lines. It's a great time to go ahead because if we're going to tear the road up anyway, fixed. It does extend the time of the project, so what you're going to hear is, hey, I thought you were done. Well, we just did the drainage. Now we're doing the water. Now we're doing the sewer, so on and so forth. And we would go back, and again, Curtis has taken all of those we talked about earlier, and he's already keyed in every one of those to see which ones don't need to be changed and which ones do. Because just because it's old doesn't mean it's broke. This is actually the picture of the water, the wastewater lines that we replaced. And they're just in color by size. But you see right there in that same area, all of those streets are in poor shape, the sewer is in poor shape, and so on and so forth. And the drainage is a little low.
One of the things that, because we have to specialize in what we're good at and outsource the things that we're not, one of the things that was funded in the it was funded out of the Red Light Camera Fund was sidewalks for pedestrian safety. And just due to bandwidth, we have not gotten to them. And so what we've not gotten to is an RF or a bid for a contractor to come in and do the sidewalks. It's a small job. You're going to connect just a few feet, move to the next slide, or the next spot. So your big contractors aren't interested in. As a part of that sidewalk contract, we're going to also contract out ribbons, the concrete ribbons. So in some of these streets, to protect the drainage, you would put the concrete ribbons in and then put the asphalt between it. And so we're going to have an annual contract so that as work happens, we can very quickly go in and fix that and not leave that hanging and all of that, because if you don't, again, have a lot of that going on, it's hard to get a concrete truck in. I mean, it just compounds itself. So to have somebody that can come in and do enough of that work at one time, get a concrete truck, lay it in, it makes sense. So we're anticipating that in addition to the sidewalks, that the same vendor that would do that would be able to have a crew to do these small projects as well.
So and that really allows us to speed up the process because our crew grows immediately. Somebody comes in and does that. And again, that's the area that we talked about where you'll have these conversations later. Because these streets are 20 feet wide now. They don't have to be 32 feet wide. So, but we just need to talk about that standard later on. And that substantially brings down the cost. But there's no parking. You can't drive in the ditch, that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of things you give up when you don't have white paper. Just wanted to touch on these one more time. So for that preventive maintenance on the asphalt, we're going to 3-year crack seal, 7-year seal coat, 14-year overlay, 17-year crack seal, 21, 28 overlay again. To get you out to that 21-year pavement life, 28-year pavement life, sorry, subgrading base. And I took this from Linda because it's just your future, right? We talk about that all the time, so I made her own street sign that we could drop in there. But we're making a choice today truly on, do you want to do this, or do we want to head this direction? Any questions? Just a few.
Good job, Trey, and sorry for the, we've all had those panic attacks when your file goes missing. That's not a good feeling. I think you've done a really good job of presenting a ton of information. Council, any questions? And Councilmember Jones, I'm glad you're here safe. Any, Councilmember Ennis, Nelson, Peterson, Mayor Pro Tem?
The goal tonight was just to introduce you to Street Maintenance 101, and it is drinking from a fire hose. We will upload all of the presentations in your Dropbox so that you can begin to study them. I will not only answer any of your questions that you have us, but again, extend the opportunity for you to get your personal tour, and we'll get the map, we'll drive the roads, we'll get out and walk, we'll point, and build up your ability to not only understand the concepts, but know what they look like and know where in town you'll find them. In June, when we have our budget meeting, we will bring back the Main Street project, understanding what its intentional scope is. We'll try to address sidewalks that we have ownership of or an easement to, figure out what we don't have, so that y'all can give some policy direction on that. And we will also craft a conversation in June relative to money dedicated to this problem. Now, the one thing that I will say is we will have preliminary estimates from BCAD in May. But last year, they were significantly less by the time we got to the budget. We had reduced them by what we thought was appropriate and built the budget around it, and we got our feelings hurt when we got the final numbers and spent a couple of weeks readjusting what we thought we were going to be able to do. So I will offer the numbers with a strong asterisk and a cautionary tale. That all that is just a number on the page at this point. So we'll bring that back to you in June. We will schedule that July work session that will be the bus tour that we'll go out and look and do in hopes that in June and July, y'all will be giving us a little tighter policy direction so that when I present the budget to you in August, it comes with a plan. You gave us this amount of money, and this is our recommendation operationally on what we believe is the best use of the money that you're willing to allocate. Because at the end of the day, it is your decision to do that.
See, Manager, you had made the comment to me, and I don't know if it's finalized, but that I believe staff intention is to go to a 2-year budget.
Yes.
Is that for sure?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things possibly could be it's 3 cents this year and 1 cent the next year.
Oh, absolutely.
So council needs to realize that they would be able to model that as well.
So if we can, let's move to 2D, other budget-related issues, and let me address.
Councilmember Ennis has one question.
Okay.
The legend over here on the pavement condition index, I don't relate that to anything.
The red is poor. Think of it in the context of a traffic light. Red means it's poor, very poor. It's a failed street.
Okay.
Yellow is going to be the fair. It can still be saved, but it's going to cost more to save it. The green, good streets, keeping good. The mayor raised the point about the 2-year budgeting. One of the items in our work plan is to present a budget that meets all of the Government Finance Officer Association standards, and there's 24 of them. And the premise behind this award is to enhance the transparency of the public's money so that when you get a budget, all of the elements that you need to be able to understand where your money is going are being met. And to this point, we've not presented a budget that has met that standard. That's important to Tracy. It's very important to me. So we have purchased some budgeting software that integrates with our finance module so that we can now prepare a 2-year budget. You will adopt only fiscal year 2019. You'll always adopt the first of the 2-year budgets. But the power of that 2-year budget is when you make a decision, you need to understand its impact on future years. Because if not, you're operating again in a vacuum. And so we're going to use it not only to give you better understanding of the ramifications long-term of your money, But we're also going to use the second year for the things we can't fund this year. And so that gives us an opportunity to educate you on, they're important, but we've made some other priorities, but no, they're sitting out there and we need to talk about them. And so some of those we will plan work sessions and begin to educate you on their importance, and do what we've done every month this year is we've picked a subject and we've talked about it and given y'all time to digest that. We'll do some of that next year in our work plan as well. The other thing is Tracy is going to start doing 5-year financial projections. And she has spent quite a bit of time with Sean Kirkpatrick because when a property is permitted, it may take 2 to 3 years to actually end up on the tax rate. And so she's built a schedule based on all of the development that has occurred and is occurring and what year we think it will be going on the tax rolls. We will begin to do more of that modeling from an expense standpoint so that we'll be able to anticipate several years in advance when we're likely to reach some kind of financial challenge. So we can start anticipating in 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, we're going to have this challenge and better educate the citizens that have to pay for all of this when that's likely to occur. One of the other things that you will see as a result of the GFOA certification that we're striving for is a improved budget book. And so rather than us presenting you budget documents and then after the fact putting together the budget book, we're going to put together the budget book and you're going to get the benefit of the budget book when you actually make the decisions. Each department is going to have what I'm going to call as a marketing page. It's going to tell you what their mission is. It's going to talk to you about their work plan and their accomplishments and how they've contributed to achieving the comprehensive plan items that we've been instructed to complete. There are going to be some performance measures. And we're not going to build you an entire page of performance measures because in most instances, 2 to 4 performance measures operationally tells me all I need to know about the department. I know whether or not it's running well based on the performance measures. So we're going to pick performance measures that empower our managers and our directors to have good information from which to make decisions. And then they will have some summary pages. And the intent is if you want the numbers, you got the numbers. But I teach a class about budget. It's really not about the numbers. And the reason for that is that the community, at the end of the day, they don't care about the numbers. They do care about the services they receive for the tax money they pay. And really, it's not any more complicated than that. So we need to do a better job of explaining on a departmental level what services are you going to get for your money. And we're going to break it down in cents per day. You've seen me and the mayor talk about you pay today $2.63 in property taxes. This cup of coffee that I'm addicted to is $5.35 a day. It's not even my cup of coffee. And she's put together a great slide about all of what you get for that $2.63. Well, we're going to do that on a department level so we can begin to educate our citizens on the value of the money that they get in services and programs from their local government. Because I always say the best game in town, the best value in town is your local government. Because for $2.63, there's not much at Walmart you're going to buy. Truly. It's hard to buy a candy bar at Walmart for $1.50. So when you really think about what you get for that $2.63, it kind of takes the sting out of, oh my God, I'm writing this big tax check. Well, you are, but it's not coming to us. So all of that to say, 2-year budget. So you're going to adopt that first year. We'll be able to understand the impact in the second year. We'll be able to talk about not what we can afford this year, but what we need to anticipate and plan for next year. And then you'll be given a budget book that we're working really hard as an organization to be able to submit and get that GFOA budget certification that says we have produced the best budget possible to provide open and transparent information to our customer. And so that's part of what you'll see as we take this journey with the budget. And there's a lot of work going on. We've had a lot of budget meetings, and we're really retooling how we do, and who's ultimately in charge of it. And by doing that, there's ownership in this organization, because to this point, Ms. Waldron has been in charge of the budget. Ms. Waldron has gone in and scraped everybody's budget to figure out how to balance this. Well, that's unfair. And so part of what we're going to do is we're going to own our budgets, we're going to own our departments, and we're going to be good teammates to Ms. Waldron, because moving forward, y'all are approving an awful lot of assets and infrastructure that we've now got to account for, we've got to plan for, and so she's going to be called upon to do a much higher level of fund accounting and projections and revenue projections, because this is where we start, it's not where we end. And so we're going to provide some capacity to Tracy to be able to provide you and the public better information from which to make more long-term decisions. And so that's our goal. The other thing, Mayor, with that, if there are some budget things that you're thinking about that you think are important, it would be helpful if we could kind of have a conversation about that, just so that I don't get to June or July and y'all throw out this really good idea and I wish I'd had 5 months to do something with it. So do y'all have anything that we haven't addressed that y'all have an interest in?
I am encouraged that the Old Iron Bridge is in June, because that's a big topic. So.
Yes, ma'am. And so one of the things that is important is we need new lights on the bridge. And so we've gotten a fairly expensive number. The problem is that the bridge is, what's the word you use? Structurally unsound. And so why would we spend a ton of money hanging lights on a bridge that is structurally unsound? The reality is it's an iconical bridge, and it's iconic because I don't see many marketing pieces of Bastrop that doesn't have that bridge in it. And so if we're going to invest a ton of money hanging lights on a bridge, we probably ought to equally invest money in ensuring it stands. And so we're going to bring that conversation to you. We're going to bring you the structural piece, and then we're going to bring you the lights on the bridge piece, so that we can figure out a way to incrementally begin to address those long-term issues.
As a benefit for being on the council, if there's a street that's red right next to our house, can it be prioritized?
That would be an affirmative no, ma'am. I'm going to protect you from yourself. There will be some prioritization, and if I can get a majority, we'll do that. But I'm not going to take that phone call, ma'am.
Any other comments, council? Anything else you want to share? Okay, it is 8:39, and we are adjourned.
Thank y'all very much for your time. We appreciate it.